Okay, so I get calls from people all the time that want to relocate to the area, and they're asking me, what the heck is this massive fee to live in St. Johns County called a CDD fee? And it is really kind of confusing, but it's not. And today I'm going to try to simplify it because people just rather avoid it altogether. But in reality, if you want to live in a master plan community with that resort style living, especially in St. Johns County, a lot of communities here have a CDD fee. So what is a CDD fee? And how's it different than an HOA? And if you're paying CDD fees in your property taxes, is it tax deductible like your property taxes? And why do I want to live in a CDD community? And finally, what's better, a CDD community, or should it just be better off living in an HOA community? Today, I'm going to straighten that all out for you because I think it's important when you're buying a home and you're paying that $2,000-$3,000 a year additional to live in a CDD community. Do you really understand what you're getting? Let's dig into it today, right now. Okay, so for context today, I'm going to use real life examples. I'm going to use the massive successful master plan community of Nocatee, which is a CDD community, and I'm going to compare it to a non-CDD community such as SilverLeaf, which is an HOA community, just for context so you can understand both. Now, if you don't know about Nocatee, there are plenty of videos on my page about Nocatee. And if you don't know about Silverleaf, I've also created overview content on Silverleaf as well. It's titled a non-CDD community here in St. Johns County. Now, St. Johns County doesn't have a lot of communities that are not CDD because the model works so well that they have been wildly popular. Now, that's not to say there's not any HOA communities. We have Silverleaf and a few more. And then we do have very few non-HOA communities up here as well. But regardless, we came from South Florida. And South Florida, at the time, we lived in a condo. And so we had the experience of a very intense HOA board. And certainly the success of condominium living in HOAs is dependent on who's running the HOA, if you will. And then we went to one extreme to a non-HOA community, and we realized there that the non-HOA community that we lived in, single family, it didn't have sidewalks. It was an anomaly. They did have a park because they had a city park in the neighborhood. But usually a non-HOA community, you're not granted to have a park unless there's a city park there already. We didn't have sidewalks, and we were growing a family, and while we're like, we really don't have anything here. So the next option for us in South Florida would have been more like a country club community to be able to have all those amenities we were looking for with kids, such as sidewalks, if you will, a community pool, or a park, or somewhere you can go to walk the dogs and everything. And so really in South Florida, the next step up was a country club community. And back then, when we were, after the 2007, 8, 9 crash, we saw what happened with a lot of the country club communities in South Florida. A lot of people couldn't afford them anymore because country club fees have like a massive fee to become a member of the community. And then you have to pay a minimal spend every month to be able to maintain the restaurants and the golf course. Most of the time they have golf courses. And so if you weren't a golfer, it didn't even make sense to have membership to these country clubs unless you just had a social membership or a tennis membership, if you will. So again, that's the structure down there. And what we saw after 2007, 8, and 9, that when you were selling a home in these country club communities, you had to buy the membership to the country club the home was in as well. And there was a few exceptions, but a lot of that model didn't work out well because people didn't want to be strapped to a minimum spend of $1,000 a month at their country club on meals and whatnot. And they couldn't sell their property because folks were not wanting to they weren't able just to buy the home in a country club community with the amenities and have that choice. They had to buy the country club membership as well. And those memberships were very, very expensive. So when we came up to St. Johns County, we didn't really question a CDD fee because we came into these massive master plan communities and they were beautiful and it was resort style living and they had all the amenities and tennis courts and pools. And even more so in Nocatee, these giant water parks, we were in awe and we're like, how much does this cost a year? And, they're like between $2,000 and $3,000 a year. Down in South Florida to have that kind of living, maybe minus the golf course, that was a $60,000, $70,000 fee just to get into the neighborhood. And so the $2,000, $3,000 that it costs in a CDD community, we didn't even blink an eye. We didn't think anything of it because we were living in a non-HOA community and we didn't have sidewalks and we were starting a family and we wanted to be able to take Ella on the sidewalks and push her in her stroller. And then, we wanted to be able to teach our kids how to ride a bike safely with sidewalks and like we have here, greenway trails. And so there was a lot of things. We were fortunate, again, that we lived in Boca Raton in a non-HOA community that happened to have a city park that was really cool. But we wanted all those things. And we thought, well, that additional $2,000 to $3,000 is a very small price fee to pay. And to be able to have all these amazing amenities that these master plan communities offer. So for us, it was not a hard decision to choose at all. So let's talk about where did CDDs formulate and why did they formulate? Okay, now the fun part. What is a CDD? It's called a community development district, and it is a special purpose local government entity established under the Chapter 190 of Florida statutes. And it's to create and manage infrastructure and amenities in planned communities. It allows developers to fund large-scale projects through tax-exempt bonds, which costs are repaid by the homeowners over time via property assessments, okay? It's paid in your property taxes, all right? Now, back in the 80s, Florida had become wildly popular, and developers had to figure out a way to finance these projects. And it wasn't just the building of homes, it was actually the building of the infrastructure. And we're talking about roads, water systems, and then we start talking about parks and amenities and recreational systems. So this infrastructure had to be financed, and the larger these projects became, the more of a burden it became to the local entity. And so therefore, the local government said, hey, let's formulate this under this Chapter 190 of Florida statutes. This is going to be a government-run organization that allows developers to take out tax-exempt bonds, loans that are government-backed to create the infrastructure of these developments. And folks that are buying the homes will pay it back through assessments annually in their property taxes. It makes very good sense because if you're living in that community and you're part of that CDD and you're benefiting from this massive master plan community, that you would pay back those loans. Now, the beautiful thing about that is that if they're run properly and the community is wildly successful, like a Nocatee, the great factor of this for developers is their tax-free bonds. All the interest earned from the money coming in is tax-free, and the bond is backed by the government as well. And so it gave them more liquidity, more money to offer more to you as the homeowner, such as these massive water parks, the greenway trails. In Nocatee, we have a specific golf cart roadway, and then we have a separate sidewalk for runners, for walkers and whatnot. So all these wonderful things are because of the formulation of a CDD. Now, the first CDD was started in Fort Myers and back in '86, one of the first. And now today there's over 200 CDDs according to the Great Wide Web. And they've been able to make them improve upon them more and more. And so they become wildly popular. Now, naturally, when I said in South Florida we didn't know much of them, is because usually they're for these larger master plan communities. And in South Florida, we didn't have the land back in after the 80s. We didn't have the kind of land mass to create these master plan developments. So you won't see as many down there in South Florida as opposed to up here in Northeast Florida. It's dwindling, but we still have enough land where still these larger master plan communities are thriving, and therefore why they're more popular here. So what is a CDD fee? All right. So as a homeowner, when you purchase a home, every home in that community is going to pay their CDD fee, and it is paid annually in their property taxes. Okay. There's a bond portion of the CDD and there's a service portion of the CDD. Okay. The bond portion is the loan that the developer took out to create all the amenities and the infrastructure of the community that you get to take advantage of, including the dog parks, for our little pooches as well. And so the bond portion usually it can be a 20-year bond, and it usually accounts for a good portion of your CDD fee. Most CDD fees run between $2,000 and $3,000 a year. You pay it through your property taxes, although it is a misconception. Your CDD portion of your property taxes is not tax deductible. Your property taxes are tax deductible, but your CDD portion of your taxes are not tax deductible. Okay, so that's a little bit of a misconception. Now, I don't want to argue with anybody of this. This whole video is purely opinion. You should talk to your accountant. You should talk to your attorney to gather and verify all this information as well. But as far as I understand, or at least personally, I do not write off my CDD fee payments on my property taxes because they're not tax deductible. Okay, so the bond portion is every home in the community that is built has to help pay off this massive loan the developer took for all these, for this master plan community, for all these amenities. And usually the bond, in this case, is about 20 years. Okay, and so the other portion of the CDD fee is the service portion. Okay. And that is the part that helps run these amenities and runs maintains all of this infrastructure and all the green belt parks and all that kind of thing. Now, one of the things I didn't understand, and which is a little bit more clear to me, is that the events in these master plan communities, because in Nocatee we have over 200 events a year, that's actually paid for by the money that they make in the CDD. Okay, meaning for when you go to the water parks, all the drinks and food and beverages, the money that is made actually helps pay for the event portion of the costs of living here. So like everything, every community, wherever you live, you pay for what you're getting, right? It's just the efficiency and the size of the community allows for more amenities based on how many people are paying into it, okay? Whether it's a CDD or an HOA fee. Either way, the money has to come from somewhere. But the way the CDD operates as opposed to an HOA is that it operates, since it's a government entity, it operates under the Florida Sunshine Law. And what that means in simple terms, it operates with full transparency, okay? I like that because there are 5 members of a CDD on the board, and they have to operate with transparency, and all meetings are open to the public. And so they have accountability. Now, the caveat, and now on an HOA is not quite the same. HOA is not a government entity, so it is a corporate setup. And so depending who's running the HOA, there may not be as much transparency. That's why I used to see back in the day in the HOAs in South Florida, there were issues with members of the board that were not playing nice. They weren't being ethical. There was kickbacks on vendors, and it wasn't structured well. The other big thing, which I never understood, is they never had reserves. So if they didn't have reserves in condo buildings, they couldn't maintain the building properly. And that's why what happened down in Miami, where the concrete structure was not being maintained properly, and it crumbled. So again, an HOA does not have to have the transparency of a CDD, which is funded by the government and backed by a government-backed bond. Okay, so that's one thing I kind of like. I like that transparency aspect. Now, the caveat though on a CDD is that a CDD, the members of the board are usually picked out by the landowner, because the landowner, like all feudal times, was the man with the power, right? And so the family that owns most of the land up here, exactly one prominent family that owns Nocatee and E-Town and all these master plan communities and projects, Emerange, they pick the developer, which is the park group. And of course, the developer and the landowner initially are the ones picking the advisors to the CDD. So they make all the decisions really because they're on the board. It's transparent, and eventually over time, they're supposed to transfer the power and those seats on the board of the CDD to the public, okay, the residents, okay? Now, because they have so much money vested in these projects, they are not going to relinquish that kind of power to the residents quite until they're done. And so for an example here in Nocatee, they are finishing up development of the homes, but they're still massively cashing in on the commercial development of this community, okay? And so therefore, they're not going to relinquish that much power because they're still deciding whether or not they want to put a hotel, which can be very profitable, or more multifamily, or more. Now, they made those decisions a long time ago, but they're the ones that are voting on those decisions. And if they'd given too much power to the residents, a lot of residents said, hey, I don't want a hotel. I don't want a Chick-fil-A. I don't want any more apartments. And so the reality is they still control the power of the CDD. And eventually they have to relinquish that power up to the residents once they probably have already created all the infrastructure and all the commercial development and made all the money they can. Now, SilverLeaf is another massive master plan community here in St. Johns County. This has 16,000 plus homes apparently that they're going to build over time, or they're at least getting the permitting to it. And this has got a different business model. They decided to go with an HOA. Now, one thing you got to understand, just because you have a CDD fee in Nocatee or a CDD fee in Rivertown, you still have an HOA fee depending in the neighborhood to take care of those common areas, okay? The CDD fee picked up the big bill on the parks, the dog parks, the amenities, the water parks, those things. but the small bills within your community are still paid for by the HOA. And again, depending on what that looks like in your community is dependent on the amount of the HOA. A lot of these HOA fees are pretty reasonable, and you are paying them on top of your CDD. Your CDD fee is paid by your taxes because it's a government organization. Your HOA fees is paid to your HOA, depending on your community, quarterly, annually, monthly, wherever, depending on where you live. And so that is a difference. So back to SilverLeaf, they decided to not do a CDD fee. In fact, that is their marketing ploy. Hey, if you want to live in an amazing, massive master plan community like SilverLeaf and you don't want to pay a CDD fee, we don't have them. So what does that mean? Well, they still have a master HOA and a regular HOA, okay? It's just formulated differently, okay? So at the beginning of development, they have a much lower master HOA fee. And with the master HOA fee and the neighborhood HOA fee, your fees are still less than if you lived in a CDD community like Nocatee, which is almost done, because you have a CDD fee in Nocatee and in an HOA fee. It comes across as higher. They range anywhere from $2,000 to over $3,000 total. In a SilverLeaf, a master plan community in the beginning stages, their master plan fees and their HOA fees can run you $2,000 or less a year, or a little bit less. So it seems like you're making a large savings, but the question is, what are you getting for that master plan living, right? Their SilverLeaf is on their second amenity center. They don't have a welcome center. And again, that's okay. They choose to operate that way. Not having a $3 million welcome center infrastructure like they're building in Everrange. They are basically saying, hey, we're not going to do that. We're going to save that money so that we can keep our costs low for our residents, okay? Does that mean as SilverLeaf continues to develop over time that their HOA fees, their master HOA fees, and their your neighborhood HOA fees can go up? Absolutely, of course, okay? Because somebody has to pay for that third amenity center, that fourth amenity center. So it's all dependent on how successful they are in selling their homes, okay? Now, a big factor for me, like when I did my video about SilverLeaf, my gauge on the success of how a master plan community is going to be, despite the fact that it's an amazing location and real estate is all about location, location, location. But the other big factor for me is when you start seeing major retailer like Publix say come in and say, hey, we're going to build the biggest grocery store in Florida here in SilverLeaf. So that gives me faith that they've done the research and they saying, look, SilverLeaf's taken a while to get started, but so did Nocatee back in the day. But they're now at 2,000-3,000 homes. They're on their second amenity center. They believe in the credibility of the property because the real estate is gold. Property insurance is much more reasonable here in St. Augustine and Jacksonville than most places in Florida, with the exception of maybe Orlando or North Central Florida. So they see the value in that, and therefore they are investing there. Massive builders like Toll Brothers that do major research started this huge development called Newbrook. So that's where my face said, okay, these conglomerates have done their research and they said, okay, this is going to be a successful project. We want in, and now they're going to get into it. Now, the more successful these projects are and the more houses the developer sells, the better chance you're not going to see a massive increase in your HOAs, okay? So you want to be in a project that is successful, selling a lot of homes, so that the cost of all this amenities that you're paying for is equally distributed throughout all the homeowners. In this case, there's going to be 16,000 homes. So the more amenities, we're going to have more people living there to pay towards it, so that everybody's paying a smaller portion, rather than if you had less residents, you'd have to pay a larger portion for all these amenities. So I hope this is making sense. That's the difference between this CDD and the HOA. Now, The thing about the HOA is, for me on a Silverleaf, is that the HOA is not operating as a government entity, and therefore it is not required to adhere to the Florida Sunshine Laws, meaning it does not require full transparency. So I believe that the developer, the landowner of Silverleaf, for example, just my opinion only, is that they're like, hey, we don't want to deal with all the compliance issues of a government entity, because that's one thing you have to be really good to navigate and costs a lot of money, is compliance to the government entity. And not only that, we don't want to have a board and determine, if we want to allow this retailer in our community, or we want to add this road here, or do we want to add another amenity? No, we want to run the show ourselves. And so that way we choose to do it as a master HOA. I don't know if that's really the factor or not. I think also the big factor is we want to keep costs low, and people always have the wrong idea of a CDD. So they're like, hey, we're going to market ourselves as a master plan community with no CDD fee. So that's going to be really interesting to me, because I want to see what happens with that model. As I do want to see, living in Nocatee, what happens when the CDD, the developer, is out, okay, and they moved on to the next project. What does that look like for our CDD on maintaining these amazing amenities when the board transitions to the residents? Okay, because it's a thankless job and nobody wants to do it. But luckily I did my research, and there are also companies like management companies, and one of them is a government management company that they come in and they currently help the CDD make sure they're compliant, make sure their financials are in order. So there are third parties that do that, just like they do in an HOA. Everybody has a homeowners association, or a management company. And so your community is as good as your organizations, okay, whether it's a CDD, your HOA, but there's definitely more accountability with a government CDD than a private HOA. So I hope this kind of gives you an idea on everything. The other thing I can think of in the top of my head is that on a CDD, okay, if it's budgeted properly and they're making a lot of money within all their amenities, like Nocatee does very well with their food and beverage and whatnot, and they're running financially well and they make good, sound decisions, that we haven't seen any major assessments over time. I think in 20 years there might have been 2, but in my 6 years here, I've never noticed a major difference. Now, as far as HOAs go, HOAs can go up, okay? Costs can go up, okay? Once the infrastructure is established, there's still that maintenance cost. So on a CDD, the bond portion to pay for all the infrastructure, that takes each resident 20 years to pay it off, okay? To pay off their portion of that loan, okay? Now, if you buy a house that's 16 years old, the previous owner already paid 16 years of the bond portion. So now you're coming in and you only have maybe 4, 5, 7 years left on the bond to pay off. Some residents paid off the bond portion of their CDD fee. I don't know why, but some do. So that's a selling point. Hey, we don't have a bond portion of CDD, and there's only a service portion of the CDD fee, and that never goes away. That's to have your the common areas, your green belts, your all the grass and all the amenities. Whenever you see people around Nocatee fixing the common areas, that's what the service portion of your CDD is always going to maintain in the future. And that goes the same for an HOA, okay? A master HOA is going to always have to continue to maintain everything. And so same with your neighborhood HOA. So SilverLeaf has a master HOA and a regular HOA, and that's as good as the management of both those organizations. But those prices can go up, and SilverLeaf's still in the very early stages. So the question is, how will those assessments look in the future? I feel a little better about it because they have 16,000 homes in the pipeline. They're selling every day. People are moving there. I think it's only going to get better over time. That's just my opinion. So I would be okay with that. at the end of the day, I'm not making the decision of buying my home whether or not there's a CDD fee or an HOA fee. I'm looking more at the location of the lot, the property. What do I get for what I'm spending on those amenities? And how long is this? I don't like to be the first. Nobody does. That's why there's always incentives to be the first to come into a neighborhood. And so I like to see that it's established. And again, that's why I always say about SilverLeaf, I'm like, well, they've got a major grocery store coming in, potentially a Target. Not sure if that's accurate or not. Those are all the things that I'm looking at and what I'm getting for what I'm paying to live there. Okay. And so what's better, a CDD or an HOA? I like the transparency of a CDD, government organization, run organization. I like that it runs under the Florida Sunshine Act, meaning anybody from the public can access those meetings, and the board is voted in as well. So I like that factor of it. But again, at the end of the day, it's really about the success of the development, the location, the amenities that are offered, and also seeing all the commercial coming in that they're viable. That gives me comfort in the long term on how I would pick a community, not whether it was CDD or HOA. Am I forgetting anything? If I forgot anything in this video, make sure you put it in the comments below. I'll be glad to answer those questions. CDD fees and HOA fees, whether they're master HOA, non-master, or regular HOA, either model, you're looking at between $2,000 and over a little bit over $3,000 a year. Also looking at how many homes are in that community. I'm going to give an example like Beach Walk, for instance. Not a lot of residents there. I don't think that was a very good idea, building a giant major lagoon, because it's a lot of maintenance and upkeep, and there's only about 13, 14, 1,500 homes there. So that project scared me a little bit because there wasn't enough folks paying into it. So who's going to maintain all that? But I think they've had a lot of commercial come in to help out with that, the financials in that area as well. So those are all important factors. But I think at the end of the day, guys, if you're thinking about buying or selling, and wherever you're going, it's good to have a real estate professional that very clearly states out what your costs are going to be, that whether or not you need those amenities. Maybe you're just fine in a smaller HOA community doesn't offer all those amenities. But whatever it is that you're considering, and especially if you're looking into an HOA community, you need to have a real estate professional guide you through that process to help you make the right decision for you and your family. And so my name is Greg DiTullio. I predominantly work here in a lot of new construction, but resales as well. Very familiar with St. Johns County. And I hope you enjoyed this video. Again, if you are thinking about moving the area, whether it's 9 days, 90 days, or 180 days, my information will be in the description, as well as some of those other videos that I mentioned today. And you can call me, text me, email me. I also have it pinned to the comments below. And I look forward to hearing back from you real soon. Check out these next videos, and I'll see you there.